Madonna is truly back with Confessions 2, a sequel to her seminal Confessions on the Dance Floor. After a series of middling installments, the generational pop queen has a new career highlight that's part reunion with original Confessions producer Stuart Price, and part reinvention with some new names in the mix. You guys know the drill. I'm going to give a brief recap, then my overall take on this before assigning it a score and doing my track by track. This one's a true sequel. The first Confessions on a Dance Floor came out over 20 years ago. Madonna had actually been in retreat after American Life was panned due to it being a rather harsh folktronic rebuke of American materialism and more really about her. She and Stuart Price would work on what became Confessions in a flat in London, creating an undeniable pop Bible. Confessions took listeners on this journey through her soul, touching on her fears regarding feelings and commitments. It actually spawned some hits like the Immaculate Hung Up, which is still one of the greatest examples of pop sampling ever to date. There was also the European charts hit Sorry, which I thought was underrated. Confessions is still one of the top sellers of the century. It moved 3.6 million copies in a single week. And it was rightfully acclaimed as another peak in a then 3-decade-long career. It won Best Electronic Dance Music Album at the Grammys. Madonna spoke openly about it being this fun, buoyant record in sharp contrast to American Life, and she did deliver. Legacy-wise, some consider it her peak record, one that helped define the 2000s, and even an imperial phase by the UK charts company. In 2019, a reviewer that was dissing Madame X at the time called Confessions her last great record, and they were wrong. But before Confessions 2 could happen, Madonna released a trilogy of records under a 360 deal with Live Nation and Interscope. MDNA was the first of the three, and it spawned one top 10 hit and was a touring smash. Rebel Heart was received relatively warmly, but Madame X proved to be a breaking point, splitting critics who praised some of it, but also labeled it as a jumbled, convoluted mess. Madonna seemed done by then. She began work on a now scrapped biopic, which was going to star Julia Garner. But then, by the time the 2020s rolled around, she rejoined Warner Records and embarked on the Celebration Tour, which is a greatest hits tour that was nearly derailed by health issues. This tour had her reunite with Price, who had been out of her life for nearly 15 years as her music director. And while these projects with Netflix and Universal pending TV film projects were happening, she and Price decided to make a sequel to Confessions, with the first hint coming in September 2024. Madonna ended up centering the new record around family trauma, particularly after tragic passings of her brother and stepmother during the tour. The track Fragile had been written after a call with her brother. The test featuring her daughter Lola Leon was sort of proof to her that now was the time to make this album. Madonna would also work with some new voices beyond Price. She would DM current pop princess Sabrina Carpenter for Bring Your Love, and she also brought in Martin Garrix, Stromae, and Fade in for features. Production-wise, Madonna and Price took the reins for a majority of the record, with some assists from Arca, Circuit, and Taney, amongst others. Confessions 2, like its predecessor, evokes a DJ mix with its 1 hour and 3-minute runtime, feeling more like a fluid single body of work. Promo involved a Grindr campaign, a commercial with Anna Wintour, a FIFA version of Read My Lips that is going to be performed at the halftime show of the World Cup, as well as a surprise performance at Coachella with Sabrina. Madonna would preview this record at club confession parties around the world, and of course there was a star-studded film that was centered around the initial few tracks released in June. I really want to note that for younger fans, all of this was a blessing to actually be alive and cognizant during a full-fledged Madonna era where the Queen of Pop was actually fully thriving. That is a gift that you do not take for granted. The record bowed on July 3rd to acclaim, with many dubbing it her most personal record to date, and also one that was a bold reinvention with real purpose that has not been seen since 2005. So what did I think? People have been playing with the idea of pop record sequels. This is actually the first one to work for me. In comparison to the original, it balances honoring that heritage while also growing past itself. I think it's a dance record that accounts for history, subgenre. She seamlessly goes from acid house to funk to Eurodance to techno to two-step garage, all without missing a beat, and there is no contest for the Grammy category this year. An emphasis is put on storytelling here that really gives this record some edge. When she said confession, she meant it by way of spoken word passages that contextualize the track and give a sense of purpose to them. It's so antithetical to the modern streaming algorithm sound. It's almost a middle finger to post-TikTok pop. Even the features themselves yield to Madonna's vision, only working to complement the singular story that she's made. I really do think that you're supposed to experience this in a club first and foremost. I had the pleasure of going out to an event, and I think it clicked for me there. You have not lived until you heard Love Sensation, surrounded by a bunch of sweaty girls and gays getting their life. It's so referential, both sonically and spiritually, to her past. At times, you get a little bit of erotica, like on School, and then you have some bedtime stories on My Sins Are My Savior, where she gets very Catholic with it. She even draws from Ray of Light on the closing track Lower East Side Girl, an intimate look into her pre-fame days. It is really hard to pin down an exact favorite, but I will say this whole thing kind of hit me like a truck during the disco drop of Love Without Words. You'll know it when you hear it, and it kind of feels like an exorcism of worry and dread. Not to say that Madonna doesn't introspect on this record. The last 5 tracks are tracks only someone who's aware of the mortal coil and the fragility of life can write. No pun intended, the track Fragile handles that very complicated relationship with her gay brother. Betrayal reconciles this resentment of her stepmother, who she never forgave for trying to take her mom's place. She is using dance to reconcile and forgive both them and herself in many cases. In dance, she finds commune in the space to emotionally connect and grieve. It becomes this language that she's mastered. And 21 years out from the original confession, she's found a way to share these complex, haunting moments in her life. Narratively, she opens this record stating that she loves personas, to be like other people. It's something that she's been doing even when she was this nobody dancer. Something that eventually she circles back to on Lower East Side at the very end, where she truly lifts this veil and accepts this core self. This core self that has shown through whatever veneer she's put on over the last 40 or so years. Which again speaks to how unprecedented it is to see a woman in pop still churn out highlights at the age of 67. Most like to weaponize Madonna's age against her, but I do think it's a testament to a resolve and a commitment to artistry. One that, I don't think she'll ever properly retire. I don't think that she will willingly retire. Visually, per usual, there's so much intentionality of her work, it stuns me. The cover is a pink triangle, which is a shout out to a community that has stood by her side for so long, as pointed out to me by an oomphy who sent me this beautiful tweet. Even the usage of the veil as something as a sign of mourning for queer folk who had died during the AIDS epidemic, it registers. People throughout her life are memorialized in this record, but most especially during Danceteria, which I consider the crown jewel of this album. Now having the whole record, I just admire how the single choices preview but did not spoil the listening experience. Being able to hear whole sections of this album without any warning refreshed some of those tracks that we've had since April. Again, having this be a continuous mix, arguably more fluid and deliberate than the original at parts, it remains one of the wisest decisions on this record. I'm floored by this album. I truly think that it's in contention for Best of the Year, and it is one that might define this very odd decade of pop. And now my track by track. I'm gonna keep it short and brief here, guys. I Feel So Free opens with a spoken intro where Madonna takes on creating new personas. She paints the dance floor as an oasis where she can create a new identity. The switch between spoken and sung word, it's very deliberate, where she's sublimating and sketching out who she intends to be throughout this record. The synths toward the end seamlessly mix into that next track. Good for the Soul is this meditative hymn where she extols conscientiousness. Over an organ-driven, synth-laden beat, she affirms that the act of dance is what ensouls the human spirit. Verse 2's astrological callouts lend this divine spirit a mix of the predestined and the yearning to make sense of time itself against this UK garage sound. One Step Away speaks to movement being a language itself. The sound is so squarely in tune with her 2000 self, but with the hindsight of nearly meeting death. This is a track that extols in the chorus how dance is the key to freedom and the dance of life. It is much closer than we think, and the bridge itself is about taking that leap of faith and crossing over into a new plane. I consider the opening 3 tracks a trilogy of manifestos. Bring Your Love with Sabrina Carpenter is a duet on the dance floor about being scrutinized. Carpenter is no stranger to being an embattled pop star, and it's this generational tit-for-tat between figures who have been slammed for being women in the industry and being sensual. I Did It All for Love against those lines about numbers is this declaration that this album is for the arts and not the charts. The sample of Inner City's Good Life and Rochelle Jordan's Doing It Too pay tribute to classic dance. Danceteria is a tribute to Madonna's career starting. It was this place, it was a nightclub in New York in the 80s. This track is a name check of people who really made her who she is today. It's both a eulogy, but also speaking in present tense to keep them alive. A story about a dancer, a boy toy, the doorman who presented her first ever performance, both of whom passed from AIDS, a DJ that introduced her who died many years ago. Verse 3 just name checks how she really did know everybody as she was coming up. And this track immortalizes everyone living and deceased alongside this chorus that echoes that debut track of hers, Everybody. I do think that of all the tracks to listen to, this is the heart of the album. It's the one that everyone should listen to at least once. Read My Lips with Colombian superstar Fade continues the party with this Euro dance Latin pop infusion. The guitar in the instrumental and the horns, it lends this bouncy back and forth. Between these two stars about deception and love on the dance floor, Taney's production gives the two room to really float on the beat. Everything is just acid house, where M goes off about isolation that is coming off from everyone's kind of addiction and reliance on digital devices. The visual metaphor of these literal crystallized screens taking over everyone's lives, keeping them from going outside, and the song feeling like this simmering outrage that finally builds into an explosion. I just loved it. The bridge strips it down where she kind of winds it up to urge us all to step into the light and be awake and cognizant, and I think that's a very beautiful sentiment in today's times. Love Sensation brings in romance into the equation. This one's apparently not a confession, it's just utter joy put onto a track. It is disco, it is house, it evokes Kylie. It kind of speaks to how love is the cure to everything that ails us. Love Without Words comes after, and it's this track that had me floating. Lyrically, it's very sparse. There's just a very natural symmetry to what she's singing about. Ultimately, the instrumental does so much of the work, as does that spoken refrain. It really recalls erotica, but it has this neat kind of undercurrent with music. That combined with the drop just makes something very powerful and just something that you need to experience communally. Like, I'm serious, like dance on the dance floor with it. Bizarre with Martin Garrix evokes Eurythmics with its production. I think the track really recalls this failed relationship with Sean Penn from the 80s. The chorus looks back on how odd love works, while the post-chorus has this tinge of desire. It sounds very hypnotic, and I really love the rearrangement of the melody on the bridge. School is very sultry, very sensual, where Madonna reconciles her ability to kind of please herself and others. It's a techno track that really hisses and unwinds throughout. A friend of mine who loves Madonna brought up how this track kind of really does feel like bedtime stories when I asked about it. The vocal effects and the delivery, how she bends and shifts along the track, adds a very unique texture to it. Fragile kicks off the more contemplative end of the record. The intro really kicks off this understanding how energy will never die, but it is hard to let go of loved ones. Against this drum and bass production, Madonna goes into childhood trauma, this deep empathy that she finally has for her brother. She sings about seeing him in her dreams on the bridge, wishing that he finds this place on higher ground, another sense of existence that maybe one day they can reunite. My Sins Are My Savior with Stromae opens with this French verse about being broken and how those sins actually save her. I think the chorus reiterates this point before Stromae goes into this verse that is affirmative. This track I found to be about judgment, which is a theme that she always confronts. She has always faced judgment, but she kind of finds solace in knowing that God, as her witness, vindicates her as a soldier. I found this piece to be about finding purpose in survival, and I thought that was such a unique perspective point to sing about on a dance track. Madonna clearly has this survivor's guilt, this thing about survivorship that she wants to evoke and express here. Betrayal is a darker, trippy track led by a trumpet that eulogizes her stepmother while also touching on this resentment that she's had for her forever. By the bridge, she's able to kind of imagine herself dancing with that stepmother out of a place of forgiveness and almost divinity, letting these waters crash in and allowing her to finally bury this hatchet. It's an insane track, but vocally she sounds so beautiful on here. The Test with her daughter Lola Leon, this is a beautiful ambient duet that speaks to how her fame really did create this divide between the two women. Some find it to be a direct sequel to Little Star off Ray of Light. Madonna's verse, openly takes fault with the way that she'd been perceived as controlling. Meanwhile, Lola's verse acknowledges her mother's weight on her life, but eventually how she's managed to turn that into her own life and art. Arca's touch on this track makes me long for a full record where they'd work together exclusively. I just really love the touch that she had on this. The album closer is Lower East Side Girl, which shifts things towards the guitar and more of a ray of light vibe. It forgoes dance floor and feels more like a flashback at the very start of the story. Of all the tracks, I felt like this was the most intimate because it paints this version of her that she felt for the longest time she could never reach again, but it's always been there. She recounts falling in love. It is sort of like a coming of age story about an old love in a time where she wasn't some monumental force. She was just this girl living on the Lower East Side, untethered, unaware. The closing line, everything fades away, is both wistful and joyful. It's an acceptance of life, death, and dance. All in all, I have to give this a 10. I really don't have anything more to say, or maybe I have like another hour worth of speaking to say once I am able to further digest this, but one word review, wow. And that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for being patient for this review. Let me know your thoughts below about this album, how you feel about it, how it stacks up to the original. I dare say I might like it a little bit more than the original. But don't quote me on that. I change my mind often, but let me know in the comments what you thought. Shout out to my subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Shout out to my members. Thank you for taking that extra step of supporting my channel. I love you guys. Check out my Substack for written versions of reviews and concert reviews. I'm starting to do more off-the-wall stuff on there. So yeah, I hope to see you next video, and thank you so much for your time as always.